And I'm a man.
All right, Union of the Unwanted International Edition. Ricky, take it away.
Yes, it only makes sense somebody who actually wasn't born in the U.S. is hosting the show. But yeah, we're doing a international edition of the Union of the Unwanted. We want to get some of our friends from overseas to join us and not have to join us at 1 a.m. or whenever it is that some of the past guests have joined us. So thanks everybody for being with us. We have some people who are going to jump in and jump out. So, bear with us if you see some heads just pop up. They're just friends of ours that are going to pop in and join the conversation when they can. But thanks everybody for joining us. If you guys want to give maybe, because there's not many of us who can actually do this today, you guys want to give just a little bit of a introduction to who you guys are and what you host? If the Amish guys want to do it first.
Yeah, I'll take that. Thanks, Ricky. I'm Amish Phil from the Amish Inquisition, based in the UK. And we've been covering the Corona stuff in quite a lot of depth since March. We tend to have like an hour-long interview with lots of really wild and interesting guests. And then the second half, we do sort of more like what Mike does with OBDM. We go through the news and play funny sound effects and try and have a laugh and deconstruct what's going on and the messaging we get from the media and from the powers that be. So just very thankful to be here and thanks to Mike, Ricky and Charlie for setting all this up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, it's a great show. I've been on the show and hung out with the guys, and I had one of those times where you feel guilty because you're having too much fun. It's supposed to be kind of like, I don't know, work related. But if you have not checked out the Amish Inquisition, put it in your rotation. You won't be disappointed.
We should say that Sam Tripoli wanted to be here, but he has horrendous diarrhea and just could not make it.
Oof. That's true.
That's going to be trending on Twitter very soon.
Yes. Rich Willett is here. Introduce yourself, good sir.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Cheers for asking me as well, Charlie. It's fantastic. It's really lovely to be and meet everyone. My name is Richard Willett. I'm from the UK. I work with David Icke, Gareth, and Jamie quite a lot. Actually, pretty much every day. I host the Glitch in the Code podcast, which I've had many Charlie on many times. It's a conspiracy-based podcast, but we also go into other things. But mostly it is conspiracy-based podcast and to do with all of that sort of stuff. But as you know, you kind of get into it and you go off all over the place. And I also host a show called What Af with Gaz, which is more of a comedy stuff where we look at all the strange things that are going on at the moment, and we have an unended amount of material to laugh at the sheer backwardness of what's going on at the moment. So that's more of a comedy-based one. And I've been doing this for about 15 years, looking into this stuff. My background is I'm a filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, so I make a lot of films for the iconic .com platform, which is the new platform with Gareth, Jamie, and David Icke that they launched. Basically, it's a Netflix for this sort of content that us guys make, and it's a business, so you can earn a living making this content. We have budgets to make stuff, so it's an actual industry outside the mainstream industry to make content. So it's growing really, really fast. I've got thousands of subscribers in the first year and a half. We launched it in November of 2019, and it's growing massively. So that's getting really big. And the amount of, we're trying to build an industry. So we're able to do this and earn a living doing this as well. So that's it's where I spend most of my time working, making all the video content there and the documentaries and the various series. We're working on series at the moment. I'm working on a documentary at the moment called War of the Words, which is about social media censorship. And that's my current project. So, yeah, guys, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and if you see Rich Willett's Lockdown 2020 Prime for Panic documentary that he put out during the lockdown, fantastic. You can find that on iconic.com. Check it out for sure. There's lots of great documentary films on there that Rich and the crew have been putting together for a while now. Very relevant, of course.
Awesome. Noble, you wanna jump in? Let us know who you are. And
Yes, indeed. Thank you all. It's a great honor and pleasure to be joining all of the interesting minds and different points of view here today. Noble here from the sunny UK, Birmingham to be precise. CFR Network is pretty much like everybody else's podcast of sorts, but a little bit of a twist where I like to delve into the music industry and the adult entertainment industry as well, and also just try and humanize the individuals within such genres of entertainment. Ultimately, here to ask as many questions as possible, to bring forth new ideas and new thoughts. Key thing is to uplift fallen humanity and see how we can progress and move forward on this wonderful plane that we're on at the moment.
Cool. Love it. Sam,
Oh,
picked the wrong show to miss. You could get into that for sure.
I think he might still. He said that because he
He's
was
gonna try and join us.
Yeah, he might jump in. Yeah, which isn't unlike Sam, anyways. To just randomly be like on a bike and like
Right.
you just see his face and he's all over the place or whatnot. But Christian, you want to jump in? Let us know who you are and what you do, bud.
Sure. Yeah, once again, guys, thank you so much for inviting me. Great honor to be among such, I want to say woke individuals. It's really, it's where I'm at in the south of Portugal. I don't have many friends that are into this kind of stuff that we'll be discussing. So it's great to be it feels like I'm kind of part of a community now. I host the Connecting Minds podcast, which is fairly new since October. I invite a lot of different folks on there. So I've already had Charlie and Ricky on there. It's not only about conspiracies. It's actually more about, psychedelics, our collective evolution, individual awakening that can, feed into our collective transformation, which I believe there are a lot of facets to this. I got a lot of doctors coming on and plan to have more doctors coming on talking about all the various chronic health problems we suffer from addiction to obesity to, neurodegenerative issues. So I'm hoping that as the podcast grows, I will have more analysts on. So while the idea is to attract a more mainstream audience and kind of crowbar into a lot of the stuff that I feel is actually some of the most important things we should be talking about. So that's kind of what I do. On my day-to-day, I do a lot of stuff around health. I've written one book on children's health, and I plan to continue doing that. So I feel like, that's kind of my thing, is helping to improve the health of the world so that we can be stronger, more resilient individuals and see through the bullshit and be able to, resist rather than be, eating out of the hand of big pharma, big government, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So I think Alex just joined us. Alex, you want to let everybody know a little bit of who you are and what you do, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me and greetings to everybody. So I'm a Croatian national living in Monaco for the last 25 years. Former and possibly future hedge fund manager, commodities trader, 20 to 30 some year analyst of the current monetary system. Spent a long time pondering what went wrong, why it went wrong, how we can right it. And that's essentially perhaps one of my key interests in life. Being a hedge fund manager is a way to make a living because I don't really know how to do anything else. And also 2 books. And yeah, that's that.
Awesome. Yeah. I think this is going to be a fun discussion because it seems like whatever direction the US goes, the rest of the world kind of goes in that direction soon afterwards. And it's amazing. I remember during the height of the lockdown, I actually had a lot of listeners of the Ripple Effect podcast who were hitting me up from the UK, and they're like, "Oh, what's going on here would never happen in the US because you guys have this revolutionary type of history and philosophy and you know, and it was amazing to me how I believed almost the same thing, that so many people would resist, and yet it looked like so many people I thought would not just take the news for what they're saying or fall victim to the fear of and throw logic all out the window, but they did. And it's been a wild ride, but I think these shows are important because it does show that like what's going on here is similar to what's going on all over the world. We don't live in a world where we're not all connected, and propaganda is I mean, the same propaganda is pushed everywhere at the same time. And so I'd love to kind of get everybody's feedback on what's going on in their neck of the woods, you know, especially with after the election. I mean, the election's been kind of crazy. Surprisingly, after the election, all of a sudden in Massachusetts, where I live, the curfew can be lifted now. Like all of a sudden, coronavirus isn't a big deal anymore. Things just happen to be getting better now that we have a new president. And so it seems like little by little, that's what the direction we're going to go. They're going to start kind of doing less cycles with the PCR test, do all these things. And Sam is with us. And then eventually they're going to give all the, I mean, I guess all the glory is going to go to Joe Biden, who fixed the problem, you know. So obviously, as you guys know, I'm apolitical, but it's, I think people who still don't see that there's much more going on and all these things are being used as political tools. It just, I almost feel like if you don't see it by now, then you might be a lost cause. But so any of you guys want to jump in and let us know what's going on in your neck of the woods, and then kind of has anything happened? Has there been a ripple effect from like the U.S. election to your neck of the woods? Don't be shy.
Just
no one wants to jump in. Ricky, it's funny you mentioned then about UK listeners saying that they couldn't see the US following suit. We know our sort of policy is being governed by SAGE, which is the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies. It's like this group of eminent scientists who are deciding just how fascistic we're going to be this week. And they release their minutes when they do the meetings. And at the start of last year, they said in their minutes, lockdown was not even entertained as a possibility. It was only when the Chinese showed us how to do it, and then it was imported into Europe in northern Italy. And we all saw those Twitter videos of Chinese man falling down dead in the street. And it was only when they saw it, it was like a domino effect across Europe. And I think that's why. And then all of a sudden, I remember Boris Johnson coming under pressure. All the other European leaders were locking down, and he was trying to hold out. And there was only really us and Sweden towards the end. But the pressure, the international pressure, was so strong politically. They felt like their hand had been forced.
Well, people forget, like, everybody's getting their information from like the WHO or you know, and like these big organizations. They're international. So people are like, oh, how can it be a grand conspiracy? Are all the countries in on it? I'm like, they're all getting their information from the same crooked idiots, you know? So it's like, yeah, everybody is kind of being tricked by the same people. Like, that's not hard to believe, you know? So yeah, that's interesting. I know Portugal, Christian, like, are you guys just mandated a lockdown? I obviously, being Portuguese, my parents watch, you know, the Noticias there, and it's just, they're saying that now they're locking down. I mean, based on what evidence? Have you seen any changes there, or they just, like America, just decide with zero scientific evidence that they're just going to continue doing shit for no reason?
Yeah, so we've kind of it's been a lockdown for about a week now, I think. And just recently they said that the shops will be closed from 1 p.m. on the weekends here. And, you know, I'm walking my dog on the beach today. It's a freaking ghost town. They've put like barriers so you can't go on the beach and kind of areas like that. So it's very quiet, no cars, obviously no tourists now. Like even in like where I'm at, it's a kind of very touristy area. So around Christmas, you would have a few people. Obviously, the big tourist season is kind of between March and October, but there'd still be some tourists before. Now there's no tourists. And it's crazy. And like I have one Uber driver here, and he told me that I don't know, is it the same journalist that you were talking about when I was on your podcast a couple of weeks ago, but he said that they found out that nurses, doctors that work on the front lines here with COVID patients are getting 400 euro a day extra pay. So he was like, well, if you're getting 400 euro extra pay a day, are you gonna shut your mouth and be do whatever you're told and kind of help the numbers be what they want to be? But other than that, I mean, like I know someone that knows someone that works in the hospital here, and they're saying the hospital is full. But what is actually happening is they've designated a tiny little area for COVID patients, and it's full. But if its capacity is 20 people, it's not going to be very difficult to fill it up, right? So a lot of kind of, fudging everything. I think I told you before, there was a doctor up in the north of Portugal that he got the COVID vaccine and died less than a week later. And this is not making its way onto social media. And now apparently the authorities are saying it's not completely known whether or not he actually died from the vaccine. So it's very speculative. So that's kind of it. They could only, the constitution allows only for 2 weeks of a lockdown here. So at the end of January, we expect another 2 weeks to be announced. So that's kind of where we're at. Basically, they're at the mercy of because the reason the lockdowns and the restrictions were super kind of onerous is because, as you know, Ricky, the Portuguese economy is really fed by tourism. So they wanted to maintain the tourism to some extent during the summer and shortly after the summer. So I think they will do anything they're told in order to be able to open up the border, so some money comes into the economy in the next few months.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it, is the tourism in Portugal, especially the English. You guys love going to Portugal. A lot of English tourism in Portugal. But the thing is, Joe Rogan actually said this when he interviewed Tulsi Gabbard recently. And I mean, I'm glad that he's using his huge platform every once in a while for actually putting this information out there. But he was saying he went to Google and he was looking for that story about that Florida doctor who passed away soon after he got the vaccine. And he's like, I went to Google. He's like, I put in the exact doctor's, the name of the exact doctor, put in all the exact information, and the story would not come up. And then he went to DuckDuckGo, and there he finds a story. And it's like, duh, this is the same shit we've been freaking saying for 9 months. Like, that information is being suppressed and not to protect you. Like, it's not this whole idea that it's like to stop violence or protect. I mean, I just shared a story today, which I'm sure some of you guys saw, in regards to Twitter, just in court, basically saying that they didn't take down child porn because it wasn't against their policy. What the fuck is going on here? Like, what world do we live in? And who are they protecting? They're protecting, it's madness, the people who still defend this stuff. It's obvious that information is being suppressed. And it's like that quote that you're hearing more and more about, first they came for these people and I said nothing. Then they came for those people and then they came for me and there's nobody else to defend me. I mean, I think it's a World War II quote, but that's exactly what's going on. Like right now, it's benefiting the people on the left for political reasons. But at some point, look what happened to Bernie. Like, they screwed your own candidate. So they're okay with screwing anybody. It's not about left or right. I mean, if you get in the way of the plan, if you get in the way of the elite, it doesn't matter, what your ideology is or what you stand for or any of those things. So people have to be wary of that. I mean, it's really sickening how many people are defending the censorship and defending, what's going on, because right now it helps their political team. It's wild.
Well, on TikTok, they were censoring pro-gay lifestyles, and people were going nuts about it, obviously, on the left. But they don't realize that censorship started from the right to left, conservative to liberal. And it'll eventually come back around. Marxism and all that stuff, that's what happens. I mean, you can't get anybody to look at history anymore, right? I mean, it's like history will show you in communist countries, women, ethnic minorities, and gays get marginalized, but they don't want to hear that. They just want to get rid of the people that they don't like to hear, which is a lot of the truth. And they want to live in fantasy land. It's like nobody studies history anymore. Everything's about here and now. And so much of this is driven by very rich, the children of the rich. I mean, we've heard that from the Unabomber, and we've heard that from Malcolm X. You know, the rich liberal is very dangerous. It's kind of my opinion on Aleister Crowley. Like, he's just a rich kid, and all of his friends got into these powerful positions, and he was able to spread this dumb fuck shit that he believed because it never got fucked out of him, right? So he's able to go out and preach idealism, and all of his friends from school and all of his parents' friends were in powerful positions that allowed him to push this narrative to everybody. And then you see all these idiots in Hollywood acting like this guy knew something, right? So that's the same thing right now. You have people pushing Marxism. You have people pushing taxes and censorship because they never lived through any of it. Especially these 20-year-olds. They don't remember like what gays used to have to go through. The censorship gays used to have to go through from the religious right. They don't hear any of it. They don't know anything, and they don't want to look back because they don't ever have to deal with it. Because what do rich kids tell you? You know, don't say mean things, and violence is never the answer, right? That's what they always say. Why? Because their entire life they've been insulated from fucking words that hurt and violence. They were born in the best hospitals, went to gated communities, went to private schools, went to Ivy League schools, got cush jobs interning at the best places ever. All their friends' parents or their friends got hooked up and they got jobs, went to expensive restaurants and private clubs. They don't know anything. Real life has never fucked them, okay? So things like words do hurt because the only thing that can touch them is words and violence. So that's why they push so hard against it. And that's why we live in a world where literally words are worse than violence, right? So when we had the Rosie O'Donnell, the Roseanne Barr thing with the Planet of the Apes joke about what's her name from the Obama administration? I forget.
Maxine Waters.
What's that?
Maxine.
No.
I thought it was Rice.
Valerie Jack or something. What was it? Something like that. You remember she said she looked like somebody from the Planet of the Apes.
Valerie Jarrett.
Yeah, Valerie Jarrett. And everybody lost their skulls in the black community, right? Lost their skulls. But they never looked at this woman. And the fact that she pushed for Obama to assassinate Muammar Gaddafi, and she wanted him to do it quicker than he did, which led to open-air slave trades in Libya. And then if they would have looked at her father was part of the Tuskegee experiments, where they allowed the black community to continue to have syphilis and not treat it. But nobody looks at that. Everything's about feelings right now and being manipulated. And that's where we are right now. Facts don't matter to fucking these people. And you're like, who's watching it? And I'll shut up now. I'm going long, I know. But people talk about, nobody's listening to the news. Nobody is. But what's happened now is these blue check marks are the new mainstream media. And that they take these fucking clips and they put it out to everybody. And everybody looks at it because they have a blue check mark. And that's kind of what we're up against. I say everybody block blue check marks so you don't know who they personally are. If you don't know, if they're not your favorite comic or your favorite athlete, block them because they are simply here to spread information. And that's my opinion. And I'll shut up and listen.
Well, many of these quote unquote blue checkmark influencers, quote unquote celebrities, stars, luminaries, the majority don't even run their own accounts. This is potentially even the AI that are putting out these tweets and are doing all these things on their behalf. So the plan for divide and conquer, as we know, it's been set for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. It's just over these times, it's sophisticatedly changed and tweaked and changed to the point now where we're in a COVID 1984 Orwellian dictatorship. And the various countries, i.e., as you alluded to at the start, Ricky, America seems to get the memo straight away. They get the movie script straight away. And then Europe, then I don't know if it's a delay with emails or whatnot, but it slowly then starts to ripple across and say, oh, we've got the script now. This is the plan. But the issue is, us as the general populi, when did we get an opportunity to read through the script and accept this contract and be a part of said movie? Because I haven't. I'm not getting paid to be in this damn movie that we're currently living under, I should say.
This is something I just want to pick up on what Noble and Sam just said, a combination of what you said about deleting history and algorithms. What these left woke don't understand is that Alan Turing was the guy that broke the Enigma code, and he was the guy that invented, obviously, the computer technology and the algorithm. He was gay. For breaking the Enigma code, they chemically castrated him, and he killed himself. Now, this is what I'm trying, as Sam just said, if you look into your history, this is what will happen, not chemically castrating probably, but they will eat each other alive. Maybe, Sam. Yeah, maybe, possibly. But they will take someone, use their skills and their abilities, then fuck them over, excuse my language. And that's what is going to happen to this left woke who eat each other alive now on their little cult on Twitter, because they've got no left, no right, no bad guy now. So they'll just go at each other. So what Sam and Noble were saying there is it's just funny that they're using algorithms and that to get rid of the guys that are like us who are talking sense. But actually, the guy who invented the technology that became the algorithm, he was the guy that was chemically castrated when he was used up, and then he killed himself. This is the mentality of what we're dealing with. And if people can look back in history and see how people are used up, eaten up and screwed up and spat out the back end, they wouldn't join in. You wouldn't have 20,000 troops guarding a bunch of satanic pedophiles in the White House, because they would turn around and go, because when it's my turn, they're going to throw me under the bus, aren't they? And as Sam said, look into history, because it's coming for you guys next. Not that they'll be watching this anyway.
Well,
they'll be in bed by now.
Antifa is starting to wake up to this. They're just starting to figure out that they're the brown shirts. And now they're starting to go, oh, I remember what happened to the brown shirts after they did their usefulness was used up and they were no longer needed. They were slaughtered by the SS. Guess what's coming for you, Antifa? You're done. There's no need for you anymore. You've served your purpose. And now guess what's happening? They're turning on you. Don't act surprised. This is history, man. It's like you can act like a maniac and think that you're a revolutionary and LARP all around the country and do all this stuff all throughout the summer of 2020 and make believe with your buddies that you're starting a revolution. But if you don't understand what happens to people in this role, if you don't look at what has happened in the past, you'll be the last to know. You'll be loading up into boxcars, getting resettled in the East, thinking, I hope this train ride is short, because this is what they do. You're not special. You've never been special. You're a disposable tool that these people are using, whether you be Antifa or anybody else that's trying to stir up this. And once you've stirred up the riot, you've caused the problem. The regime change has come in, i.e. now we've got a Biden situation. What do they need you for? Mop the place? Maybe, if you're lucky. Otherwise, you're out of here. So this is one of these situations where it benefits you to have a little bit of an understanding of history. I'm not saying you have to understand, back into the 1300s or anything like that. You don't need to go that far. You just need to go 2 generations back, and you'll see what happens in situations just like this. If you believe that the people in positions of power are going to take care of you, you're in for a rude awakening.
And people have to be really wary of the word of domestic terrorism. Yeah, maybe OKC, you can blame it on a domestic terrorist. You can blame a lot of things on a domestic terrorist. But you know who else was called a domestic terrorist? Malcolm X, MLK. Those were domestic terrorists. So, yeah, it's fine. People don't mind these words being thrown away as long as they're labeling people they don't like. But like Sam said, and a lot of you guys said, look at history. You don't have to go that far back to realize that, well, anybody who's against the establishment, regardless if you're on the left, if you're on the right, whatever your views are, you're going to be considered a domestic terrorist. So like I said, there's a huge issue with people only being okay with this shit when it's censoring and labeling people they don't like, but they don't see the big picture that eventually it will come back to bite them in the ass. And don't worry about swearing, Richard. I was actually hoping one of you Brits would eventually use the cunt properly, because I love your use of it.
Real quick, like the word terrorist is very interesting because it all depends on who's saying it and which angle it's coming from, right? Like what do you think the British royals thought about the Americans when they were fighting back and they didn't want to be a colony anymore? Like what do you think they labeled them as? Terrorists, right? They were terrorists. It's the same thing, man. And what's that? My biggest thing right now, I just want to say, is that right now, I made no illusions what Trump was. I said he was a crime boss. I made no illusions what Q was. I said the information had to be real for so many people to believe it. What it represented, I didn't know. And today, I say the same thing. I find it very interesting, all these black pill motherfuckers who are going off on the Q people right now, like they thought Trump was safer. Well, you knew Trump was this, and you didn't do jack shit either. So I don't really understand what you feel they didn't do. I mean, nobody's watching the news. Nobody trusts the two parties anymore. Everybody's getting off social media. These are all what we've learned in the last 4 years, okay? Here's what's going on. We do not have a rule of law anymore. From the assassination to JFK to the 2 elections stolen, okay, we have seen nothing but just the breaking the rules of the law, and the people who are there to enforce the law, from law enforcement, the judges, to the military, have not done it. What can we do at this point? What were these people supposed to do other than pull their energy and pull their money out, which they did in spades? So I don't know what the answer is, but this real simple thing of all these black pill people shitting on these Q people while leaving these Biden fucking cheerleaders free to celebrate is just, I have no clue what's going on. It blows my fucking mind, because everybody was saying that Trump's a piece of shit, yet they didn't do anything. Yet, let's say Trump was real and Q was real. What were the Q people supposed to do different? I don't know, other than what I believe is, and I'm going to shut up again, but what I believe you're supposed to do, which is look inward and fucking work on yourself. And where do you put your energy into? No more news, no more buying their products, none of that stuff. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. And I'd love to hear anybody's comment, because sometimes I just think I'm mad as hell and I ain't going to take it anymore. I'm like a crazy guy like that. But that's kind of my opinion, man. It's like, I get it that you could say that Q pacified these people for the last month, but once the election's done and all this shit's going on, I don't know what these people were supposed to do. And that's kind of my whole point. It's like, the system, the people who are set to stop corruption are doing none of it. Collecting checks, brown shirting this shit. So I don't know what the answer is, but I just find it very interesting that all the black pill people are teeing off on the Q people, like the black pill people did anything other than blog and tweet, just like the Q people. And I'll stop yelling at you guys.
Anybody else want to jump in? Alex, you want to jump in? You got some thoughts you want to share with us?
Yeah, just related to what Sam was saying just a minute ago about the rule of law being vacated, and that's, I think, an interesting one. It's something that I picked up on a few years ago, because I can't remember the name now, but one of these CEOs of some corporation, well, one of these military industrial corporations, basically gave away in a statement that he said, like, it was about the mass surveillance, right? And then if you follow the news about mass surveillance, you had William Binney saying that it's all nonsense because most of this data is never going to see light of day, that most of it just falls to the floor, that it's just too much data about too many people. And then this guy said, like, no, it's we've identified 7,000 people who matter, right? Everybody else doesn't matter. And what he meant by those 7,000 people who matter, he's talking about attorneys, about judges, about military generals, about defense lawyers, about media editors, journalists, and so forth. And so when you have this mass surveillance apparatus and you can pinpoint these 7,000 people who matter, then you can completely vacate the democratic process. And the good example was in July, this New Jersey judge, Esther Salas, was assigned the money laundering case against Deutsche Bank. And it somehow had to do with Jeffrey Epstein. It was related to Jeffrey Epstein case, right? Because supposedly a group of shareholders was complaining that their anti-money laundering practices were failing because the bank kept doing business with Jeffrey Epstein. And so 4 days after she was assigned the case, an assassin shows up at her house, kills her son, and wounds her husband. So, you know, in that environment, you know, you can pick up evidence about voter fraud. You can get all kinds of evidence about anything. Where do you take it? You bring it to a court, and somebody sends an assassin to the judge's house, and they don't even have to send the assassin. They can just give her a call and say, don't take this case, or make sure you rule the way we like it, or else we're going to hurt you. And then your whole system of checks and balances essentially is a facade with no substance to it. And at that point, I think the whole country has been stolen from under the people. And, you know, like now I don't know, I just listened to a podcast with Whitney Webb this morning, and apparently the next presidential elections will be done with some kind of a Microsoft system, election guards or something like that, nationwide. All the votes are going to be counted through some Bill Gates system. So good luck. Who are you going to, you know what I mean? And so at this point, I don't know what the answer is. I know, however, okay, so you said you might think the answer is a military coup to restore the republic. But this whole deal runs, you know, like I go back to my professional deformation of studying the monetary system. This whole system functions on the money that you pay to all these, right? Dominion system, the political parties work on you know, the whole system works on money. So who controls the issuance of money controls the whole system, the whole country, the whole apparatus. And so the key is to overhaul the monetary system and to get away from the central bank issued currency, because that's what catalyzes the whole rotten system. Anyway, so that's all I had to say about that.
Vanessa, thanks for being with us. I want to go to you. I don't want to, if anybody have any thoughts, but I know Vanessa's in Syria at the moment, and her internet connection is actually, it looks pretty good so far, but we don't know how long it's going to last. So I want to see if I can sneak in here before we lose you. But if you guys aren't familiar, Vanessa Beeley is a legendary journalist, somebody that I'm sure most of us know who she is and have run into her work before. But something that I've heard you talk about on some recent interviews, and I think it is really important. A lot of people in America think that we just voted away hatred and bombs and wars because our new administration is going to be different, even though every administration has the same war policy. Do you want to get into some of that? What do you see for the future of the country you live in now with a new administration?
Well, you know, since New Year's Eve, I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. since New Year's Eve, we've seen exactly what the Biden administration is going to bring. There have been an increase in U.S. coalition, aka ISIS, attacks on Syrian army positions, and also an uptick in Israeli attacks. In fact, on the day of the inauguration, Israel bombed Syria in multiple locations. One family, entire family, was wiped out in western Hama, which is to the northwest of where I am. Allegedly, they claim they were targeting a research center. It's not even an Iranian research center, it's a research center. But in fact, as usual, they targeted civilian homesteads and residential areas, as I said, killing an entire family of 4 and injuring tens of others. Today, in fact, there was another ISIS attack on the road to Deir ez-Zor in the last few hours, in fact. 3 soldiers were killed and around 10 were injured, as far as I know. The Syrian Arab Army Air Force and helicopters provided cover for the convoy to then reach Deir ez-Zor safely. But, you know, I as I've said in recent interviews, Trump was the economic battering ram for Syria. I mean, effectively, Trump brought in some of the most sadistic sanctions in Syria's history under the pretext of the Caesar law, which, of course, was a fraudulent accusation thrown against the Syrian government, as the majority of the accusations are. It was concocted by a Qatari commissioned report produced in the West, of course. The entire thing was stage managed. And on the back of that, basically, Trump has driven Syria into economic freefall. I mean, into disaster. Not only that, of course, under Trump, the oil fields were occupied. Delta Crescent Energy was set up to siphon out the oil in collaboration with the SDF, the Kurdish separatists, another US proxy in the northeast, occupying Syrian territory and stealing their resources. Wheat and barley crops were burned systematically throughout the summer and the autumn. You know, and at the same time, effectively, American troops are building up. Again, this is true, folks. Since Biden was made president, American troops are pouring into the northeast of Syria. You know, this isn't some kind of conspiracy theory. This isn't fake news. We've seen them. And they're definitely building up. You also have to recognize that even under Trump, the military base, the illegal military base in Al Tanf on the border with Iraq and Jordan, was reinforced. There have been military exercises that again have ramped up leading up to Biden's inauguration. Terrorist groups that are protected by the 25-kilometer exclusion zone around Al Tanf, and that are being recruited and trained in the so-called Al Rukban refugee camp, which, you know, America keeps clear of Syrian and Russian influence. We know that they've been using HIMARS. I can't remember the exact acronym, but they're basically mobile artillery units that can fire missiles with a range up to 300 kilometers. So that effectively puts Damascus pretty much in the range of the Al Tanf base and the terrorist groups that are embedded there. So I think, you know, from a civilian perspective, we're bracing for war. I can't put it any other way. You know, nobody expects Biden to be peace and roses. We're returning to the Obama, Clinton, Bush era. Crazy as that sounds, I know it's a Democrat, but it doesn't make any difference, in my opinion. The madman has handed over to the lunatics, and Syria is in the crosshairs.
We've got Jamie Ike here, CEO of Iconic. I'm curious, Jamie, you guys usually have a pretty good insight into these things. You're right in the middle of it, and I know you're filming quite a bit. How have you seen things transform in the last couple of weeks in the UK, just based on this new regime, the regime change operation that happened in the United States? How's it impacting you guys?
Well, the media over here have been pathetic for the last, well, forever, but they've been very pathetic in covering the anything to do with Trump. So it's almost like, I mean, Rich will vouch for this as well. It's almost like a New Year's Eve party style celebration that he's gone in the media here. It's very, very strange. You know, you've got British politicians tweeting out about how much it's been 4 years of turbulence and they can't wait to work with Biden. It's going to be different now. It's going to be brilliant. And it's pathetic, really. And I don't think anyone's buying it here, to be honest. I think you've got the kind of, a lot of people made a lot of noise when Trump was meant to have a state visit here in terms of protesting. But I think that was just a small minority, really. I think most people actually, in a sense, quite liked him. Because there was, I don't like Trump personally, but there's something about him in the sense of, you know, we're stood having conversations in pubs in England about him, and you're a couple of thousand miles away. It's like he's got something about him that makes you want to that is at least interesting. Whereas Biden, as Vanessa just said, you know exactly what you're going to get. You know he's going to go in. He was there under Obama when they went into Syria, went into Libya. You know you're just going to get exactly the same policy from him. He's just a puppet. And the fact that he's 78 years old, he's clearly from any debate you've ever seen him in, he's got some kind of neurological issue going on there. He's not the full shebang. It's he's probably just a complete puppet, and Kamala Harris is probably one calling the shots, or people behind her. So we were saying, interesting theory just to chuck out there, that I wouldn't be shocked if Biden got taken out and they blamed it on a Trump Q type person as a justification to bring in even stronger domestic terrorism laws in the States. Because the fact that the guy's 78, they obviously hid him through most of the campaign, didn't they, from live television debates and interviews and so on, so he could hide the fact that he's clearly got something not quite right. But now he's president, you can't hide him. He's going to be in press conferences with world leaders. He's going to be stood up at the UN. You can't hide him. If he's got some kind of issue, it's going to be shown very quickly. So it wouldn't shock me if he was just like the puppet that's there to take the fall, for then, even stronger policies to be brought in to censor everything discussed on social media and other things in the States. That's just a theory. It's not an absolute, that's what I think is going to happen. But it's always good to say things before they happen, just in case you're right.
Yeah. We've seen the ramping up of the domestic terrorist tag. It's this blanket statement that can apply to anybody that goes against the agreed upon.
To us. It applies to all of us. Any of us who are saying anything against establishment. Yeah. That's what's so fucking scary, is the fact that we could all be labeled as domestic terrorists. I mean, because we speak up against the government, because the government's always right. I mean, what about during slavery? If we spoke up against the government, would we be terrorists then? I mean, like we talked about before, MLK, Malcolm X, these were considered terrorists. I mean, these words are so dangerous, and people regurgitate them without even understanding what they mean and what they can mean for the future. Sorry, Charlie, I get worked up.
No, this is we have, like you said, we have to be very careful with words. You think, oh, there's just words, but the designation of these words, this domestic terrorist push. We saw the Patriot Act. We saw what happened in 9/11. They just dusted off the Patriot Act and put it on the president's desk. It was pre-written. The idea that there's not a legislation this thick on domestic terrorism sitting on some desk somewhere in some psychopath's office in the Pentagon, it just has to be. And we can see, you can almost, because of what we do now, we don't have a crystal ball, but we don't really need one. We're pretty good at recognizing patterns, and we've seen these things happen over and over again, where it's like you get lured, something happens, then they label that group, and then legislation rolls out a little too quick for most people's taste, that immediately targets that group with some sort of, rendition, censorship. It starts with demonization, obviously, and then the next thing you know, you just let the masses take over, where the government doesn't have to do much of anything except just let the people try to shame you. And we see this happening in social media, and there's nobody left to defend themselves. All these domestic terrorists that were on Twitter are all gone. So now they're not in a position to say, hang on a second, I'm just criticizing the government. I'm not out there with gun. I'm not starting a revolution. I'm just saying that these people are cocksuckers. But they're not even allowed to say that anymore, because they don't exist. So it's a very dangerous time in America. And I would assume that once the rest of the world gets a look at how we do it, they'll say, oh yeah, we want some of that too. Let's start going after the domestic terrorists in our country or in the EU in general. So it seems like a concept that's going to get exported.
I just feel,
go ahead.
Real quick, that I just feel like they already do that with people. I mean, free speech in some countries. I mean, look what's going on in Russia. That guy spoke up and now he's arrested. So, I mean, like, this is what's coming to the United States is what you see in a lot of the rest of the world. But my whole opinion is that I am happy that we are all diversifying our platforms and how we get information out. It's like iconic. I mean, like, look at that. I mean, putting out their own product. I think we should all do that. And so that they can't silence all of us. And I'm just sorry. I mean, we have collectively, we have some amazing followers, people who love our content, man. But if you're only going to go to these couple places to get your information, you are as bad as the people causing the problems, man. If you are on YouTube and you know that they are silencing your favorite people, and you won't just simply go to your address bar and put in a different address to go watch a video, then you are part of the problem, okay? Because we can't play there anymore. What we're saying, which is truth, and truth is scary now. We're living in a world where truth is scary, okay? Facts are now Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, and everybody's trying to run from them. And that's really what's going on. And what's going on in the rest of the world, like, I'm really in this place where it's like, it's like, I know that there's American troops in Syria right now, and I would do anything to stop it. I can't say they're my troops. I've done everything I can to do that. They're not my troops. This is the international banking cabal, and they've taken U.S. military and turned it into stormtroopers. And I get as mad at them. I get as mad as Americans as I do like Israelis, who are like, what say do they have in what their government's doing? I mean, I'm sorry, man. It's just like they're getting bombarded with propaganda, and good luck on trying to stop anything that your government is doing. I mean, we have gotten to the place, and maybe this is how it's always been, but we do not have a government that is respondent to the people. And how do we fight that? That's the question.
I have an idea. I'm not sure if you guys are doing this already, but especially guys like you, Sam, Ricky, you have a pretty big following. I don't know about the rest of you guys. I'll definitely be checking out your podcasts. But if you have a following, I feel like it's our duty to just talk to your people and tell them, are you using DuckDuckGo? Are you mindlessly still just using Google because it's a habit? Are you using cookie auto delete in Mozilla Firefox? What are you using? Google Chrome? Are you crazy? If we don't tell people there's an alternative, ad blocking software, preventing cookies from tracking you across websites you visit, telling people, incentivizing people to go to your website to consume your content. So, I mean, I know some guys, they will put out an hour of the podcast. I think, Sam, maybe you do it. You put out an hour of the podcast and you tell folks, look, just come to the website, catch the other hour or whatever. Give them a freebie. There's a million ways to incentivize people to come to the website, because your website, it's like a hell of a lot harder to shut down than your YouTube channel, your Twitter account. So I even had an idea for a podcast episode, is just to go over some rudimentary ways to protect your privacy. So like literally installing DuckDuckGo on your phone for your searches, and on all your browsers, switching to an alternative from Google, so Brave or Firefox. It's none of these things are perfect solutions, but if we can nudge some people down that path, and then they can nudge someone else. Like, for example, I had my mom install Telegram today or yesterday on her phone. So a little bit of an ordeal, but it's done, right? So if you can get 5 people to install Telegram and start chatting with them there instead of WhatsApp, that's a tangible, something we're doing, right? So that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Just to jump in, I totally agree with you, Christian, what you're saying there about using alternative software, alternative platforms. One of the major problems we have is that one of the reasons why Google is number one is because their stuff works and it's good and it's convenient for people. Same with YouTube. It is the best operating video platform out there, and people will always just take the path of least resistance. And this is part of the problem we have. And the second part problem we have is what we saw with Parler when Amazon removed web hosting. So literally, we're all gonna have to end up with our own blooming server farms and just be little isolated islands of information because none of us are untouchable.
Yeah,
It's a shame that. Sorry, it's just a shame that Jay just went because he could speak on that. When we first launched Iconic, it was me, him, Gaz, and another lady that works in the office, and Gareth Ike, and we had all our stuff on Vimeo. And I said to Gaz, I was like, Jay, just get it off Vimeo and get your own server built. And luckily, we did start building our own server pretty much straight away. And lo and behold, David spoke about 5G possibly ever maybe being connected to Corona in some sort of way, possibly given the same outcomes or the same symptoms, and on London Real. And not only did David get shut down from Real, we got shut down. We paid for a Vimeo account. We paid the whole year. We paid for everything. They took every one of our videos down. So our whole library, I think it was about 9 months into building it. Luckily, we'd already backed it up and we were about to launch our own server a couple of weeks later. And that was an early version. And this was done about a year ago now. No, sorry, about last March. Yeah, so 10 months ago. And so this is what they will do. And this has been going on for a long time. Obviously, David's been shut off from every social media. I got shut off of Twitter last week. I have no allegiance with Trump. Trump's to me is a Jesuit. Biden's a Jesuit. Bloody does it matter? In the UK, we have Boris Johnson, who's a Zionist, and we have Keir Starmer shouting him, who's a Zionist. This is how it works. And I don't think people understand these things. But also, I got shut off for showing the video of the Trump supporters and a couple of Antifa being let in through the side door of the Capitol. And I got purged. And I've constantly been saying Trump is black nobility, possibly, and a Jesuit, and he's not going to do any of this stuff. And I still got chucked off. And I was like, that's quite amazing to me. Luckily, no one really listens to me anyway, so I didn't lose any people. But the fact is that I got chucked off. I was like, how did I get chucked off? It's quite amazing. Because I was blatantly talking against Trump for ages, saying that he's done all these things. He's given Israel everything they ever wanted. He's put a bloody embassy in Jerusalem. He's helping them build the Solomon's Temple on Temple Mount. I was saying all of these things where he's going with it. But I got chucked off. And as we were saying earlier, even if you happen to talk out against the establishment, although you're not on the other side of it, you're getting stuck in the middle. And I think us guys are realizing now that what I've kind of realized is Twitter is a cult with Facebook. So you've got your left woke on Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram. You've got your right on Gab, your patriots and your few followers now on Gab, possibly Parler if it ever comes back. But then us guys in the middle going, they're both a bit shit. Where do we go? And that's where the truth is, unfortunately. Where do we go? And that's where we're getting censored, and we're going to get pushed down. And I think that's right. We're all going to need to kind of diversify. It's a little bit like you can't stamp on all the ants if all the ants are all over the place in the garden. But if we all get together, then it's easier to grab them. And I think what Sam was saying, we need to kind of be over here and a bit over there and a bit over there, and be organized chaos, possibly. That's what I think the future is for us. We can all tell the same narrative, but we all kind of come together on something like this. But I'm on Library, I'm on Gab, I'm on Parler when it comes back. I'm on Iconic, which is a paid for platform. It's a Netflix for this sort of content with the business built behind it, so we can pay for content to be made and earn a living doing this. That's the future. But having your own server is incredibly important to keep your own stuff, because as Gaz has just popped up, we lost all of our content overnight, and it actually was nothing to do with Iconic at all. But luckily, we had backed it up, and we saw this coming, and I think other people haven't.
Rich, can you go into as much detail as possible in regards to cost implications in regards to building your own server?
That would be where Jay comes in. He's the business brain behind it. I'm the filmmaker and the video producer. Gaz might know a bit more than me about building your own server and how much it takes, because he's in the office far more than I am. I'm stuck out at the seaside with no friends in my little outhouse sending videos across. So Gaz, do you got anything to bring on that?
Not really. I'll be honest with you, Rich. I'm basically in the outhouse within the office. Where the sort of computer sort of techie guys kind of go, yeah, we'll tell him, yeah, it's like a tree, off you go, and kind of I just like that really. So I don't know in terms of cost, not sure. I don't think it's cheap though. I don't think it's cheap at all.
Well, saying that, Gaz, we've just moved into a new office, haven't you? And you've got a whole room, a huge room for the servers, so it ain't cheap. Put it that way.
No, it's strange. The size of it actually was a bit sort of beyond me really. But then it's also kind of to do with different. So with davidicke.com, it's weird where things are hosted in terms of, as much as people think the UK is free, it's really not at all. And obviously when this harms bill comes in, it will be out the window, because who defines what harms, which is why it's sort of disconcertingly vague. So obviously we're in a position where we're trying to host in various different places as well, so that if you get ripped down, then you've always got, it's almost like you want to be like whack-a-mole, basically. That's the plan.
Well, if you guys haven't checked it out, the Union of the Unwanted episode 14, we did a whole show with people from Odyssey, Library, Float, Content Safe, Rockfin, a bunch of people together, alternative platforms and whatnot. And then we gathered them to kind of talk about the future of technology. How do we fight this? How do we deal with it? Mike's actually our kind of tech guy in the Union of the Unwanted. Out of the hosts, he might be able to kind of input some info in regards to something we're talking about. I think Mike, you kind of got away in the middle of this conversation, but it had to do with servers. We were kind of just discussing how hard and how expensive it is to kind of do your own server thing and kind of get away from having dependency on anybody else.
Well, it just really depends on what type of application you want to run. If you want to buy your own physical server, that's going to cost money, in addition to the electricity and the cooling that you have to provide, the air conditioning. So how many servers are you going to buy to service your infrastructure? Like today, I'm setting up my own cluster right now. I'm deploying my own cluster with its own servers, and I'm doing that through a service called Linode, or you can do it through DigitalOcean, or you can do it through Amazon Web Services. But as we found out, Amazon Web Services, they don't really like all content. So having your own servers is probably the best way if you got the money and the ability to cool them and service them and hire on-premises technicians. For longevity, you want to live in the cloud somewhere, probably in the ocean, if you have servers in the ocean, or in some country that is not too snoopy on or care about what you do or put out. So probably Russian servers. That's where Parler's going, is Russia.
It's like a digital version of hiding your money in the Cayman Islands, isn't it? You're going to just hide your tech in somewhere offshore.
Yeah.
So they can't get it.
Yeah. So I believe Google actually has a floating servers. So it's not unlike the like putting together your own libertarian anarchist colony out in the middle of international waters where there's no law but your own on the flotilla. You just put servers out there. The problem is running fiber out there and making sure that it is able to communicate with the rest of the network. So decentralizing right now is probably the best way to go, and keeping your applications as mobile as possible, Dockerizing them, using the latest and greatest open source technologies to ensure that your app can go up on the internet quickly if it's ever taken down. And that's what I'm working on right now. So if I get taken off of DigitalOcean or GoDaddy, doesn't matter. I got my app. I'll just throw it up on Linode or someplace else, reroute my URL, and I'm back up in 12 hours.
It sounds like pirate radio all over again.
Exactly, it is.
Yeah. But the funny thing with that though, is obviously pirate radio was where all the talent was and where everyone was interested in listening to stuff. And so everyone tuned into pirate radio. And then in the end, they kind of half sold out, most of them, and moved to the BBC and places like that. I wonder if that's what will happen in the end. If this like alternative, you know, whether the mainstream will come cap in hand. Can we have some content, please?
Well, the last resort. I mean, the hurdle that is probably the most secure in the long run would be ham radio. You can send internet signals over ham radio signals that can be interpreted, and you can have your decentralized internet over ham. It's just that is a difficult. It's the learning process to do that is fairly high. The bar is fairly high to learn that kind of stuff. But I think there's enough tutorials out there, and if there's a will, there's a way. I don't have a ham radio operator's license to hook in my internet and start serving web pages through a ham signal. It's something I would like to do, but it's probably going to take me like 3 years to kind of build that and learn how to do it.
By the
Who
way,
provides the licenses? Sorry, for ham radio as well. I mean, who's providing that license?
Well, there you go. That's the got to go to the FCC or get your broadcast license through whatever government organization that issues that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
there's a
Proton
connection
Mail,
back there.
Proton Mail are coming out with storage, encrypted storage. So maybe if they get enough requests from users that we want like a content distribution network for them to host, maybe they would be willing to create the infrastructure where you can host your content there, encrypted, or maybe not even encrypted, whatever, and just have a lightweight front end. Like it might even be hosted on GoDaddy or whatever, and you just serve the content from distributed CDNs around the world.
Yeah, and I think we have to take in consideration too that some of the justifications governments use to censor media are the same justifications they use in China and all these other places that we don't realize we're turning into. It's always to protect you. It's because we're protecting you. It's because we're protecting you. And people are just like, yeah, it's because it's hate speech, or it's because it's this type of speech or that type of speech. Like I always say, you fight, bad ideas with good ideas. You don't censor them. And even though I agree that like Twitter is kind of becoming a left-wing echo chamber, and Parler, you can make the argument as a right-wing echo chamber, but I'm much more okay with those echo chambers if they don't censor anybody. If Parler stays true to not censoring anybody, if they're not censoring the people from the left, then I'm okay with that. So I think that's the other thing too, is like I don't mind being somewhere where it's dominated by one idea or another idea, as long as none of them are being censored. So that's a huge issue.
Sorry, I wanted to get back to Syria. Sorry about this, Vanessa. I wanted to ask you, is, at the beginning of the election of Donald Trump, there was a couple videos that came out that explained that a big part of what's going on in Syria is that they found oil in Qatar, and they wanted to be able to get a pipeline. And the quickest way to get a pipeline, I think, to the Baltic Sea was through part of Syria. But Syria didn't want that because they're trade partners and allies with Russia. And that if that pipeline went through, then that would be the oil and energy that goes to Europe, and Russia gives Europe 25% of its energy, and that would devastate Russia's economy. Is that what this is? It oil? Or is this another thing to destabilize that area, to try to bring in Iran, try to bring in Russia for a World War III? What are your thoughts on all that? Because here we go again, what seemed to be like 40 years ago.
Yeah, well, I mean, this has been ongoing for 10 years, of course, and Obama actually pretty much started it with Clinton. Resources are a major part, but when you look at Syria geographically, they had already previously destroyed, of course, Libya and Iraq. Jordan is effectively still a British colony. Lebanon now has been under attack economically for some time, and then with the Beirut blast last year, finally decimated their economy. Their economy now is actually in a worse shape than Syria's. So Syria, if you like, was the last bastion of independent governance in the region. that hadn't yet been targeted with the color revolution and the regime change project. We know, of course, from the Bush and Blair emails in 2001 and again in 2003 that were revealed in the Chilcot inquiry, that they had already been planning a different relationship with Syria if it came into line. And of course, the refusal, as you mentioned, of the Qatari US-backed pipeline bringing fuel into Europe, and Assad's refusal in favor of the Iranian-Russian project, of course, was the final straw. But it also was because Syria refused to relinquish the Palestinian issue. It refused to demand that Hezbollah leave Syrian territory. Of course, Hezbollah grew out of effectively the refugees from Palestine that fled and settled inside Syria, and then Hezbollah grew out of that. So there is no way on earth that Syria was going to demand that they leave. And of course, they have a long-standing alliance with Iran and with Russia. Russia has had a military base in Tartus on the coastal area of Syria for the last 50 years. So, you know, this is not news to Syria. Plus, of course, it was developing the 5Cs project with China. So effectively, Syria was the hub for all of the global powers that were threatening a US unipolarity, US supremacy, and not only that, but Israeli security. This is the most important thing, because in my view, that, for example, the recent Pompeo utterances that, you know, war with Iran is protecting Al-Qaeda, etc. This isn't really about Iran directly. What this is about is targeting Syria under the pretext of targeting Iran inside Syria, because what they want is dominance over Syria, which will give full security and full spectrum dominance to Israel in the region. It will isolate Iran because it will push Iran out of Syria, right? And it will cut the land route through the Middle East from Iraq, for example, and down to Palestine. That's Israel's greatest fear here. They don't want Iran to have any sort of further influence in Syria, i.e. land access to the border with the occupied Golan territories. Of course, Golan is also another aspect of this conflict. And of course, resources, in my view, is not only oil. Israel takes 30% of its water from the Golan, the occupied Golan. So water is another hugely important aspect of this war. Turkey, a NATO member state, has been cutting off water. In fact, I believe the drought in 2009, which was the precursor of this war, was engineered by Turkey, because Turkey has control effectively over the northern territory water supply in Syria. And we know that because in Hasakah, of course, Turkey has been regularly, and the SDF have been cutting off the Aluk water station and depriving, I think it's around 1 million people in Hasakah of water. So, you know, Syria is it's a vast subject and it's very complex, but effectively America is not going to give up on this project, in my opinion. No way.
How much does foreign policy in America immediately influence the UK and the propaganda you guys are seeing? I mean, it seems like it's almost always parallel. I remember when we went to Iraq, it was like the same stuff that they were selling us here. They were selling you the same stuff in the UK. I mean, does that always seem to be the case, where it's just like they're basically the same foreign policy?
Well, I think, sorry, if I can just quickly say there, in my opinion, the UK is running the intelligence operations against Syria, for sure. I mean, the recent...
UK, did you say UK?
Sorry?
I asked, did you say UK?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because if you look at the recent UK Foreign Office document leak, both in relation to Lebanon and in relation to Syria, the UK has spent millions on supporting the armed groups, and those include Al-Qaeda, Jaish al-Islam, some of the most brutal and violent armed groups are operating inside Syria, of course, funded, equipped, etc., by the US coalition. But it's the British that, in my opinion, were behind the intelligence operations. That means the media, the publicity support for the armed groups, the whitewashing of crimes, the creation of the white helmets, for example, to act as humanitarian cover for the armed groups, and also to produce the weapons of mass destruction, equivalent the chemical weapon attacks inside Syria. Of course, that is now all unraveling real time with the recent OPCW scandals, the coming forward of experts that were part of the OPCW team, exposing the OPCW itself as a compromised organization, heavily influenced, of course, by the UK, the US, and Canada in particular, to retrospectively justify the unlawful aggression led by the US, the UK, and France after the Duma alleged chemical attacks in April 2018. So if you look deep enough, the British intelligence have been absolutely pivotal to this regime change war in Syria. And going back to 2009, Roland Dumas, the former French foreign minister, told us in 2013 that British agents had effectively contacted him and said, look, you know, if Assad won't play ball, we're going to effectively finance armed groups inside Syria to overthrow the government. The CIA operation, Timber Sycamore, as I say, the evidence is glaringly obvious that this was an intelligence operation that was planned well in advance. There were various options. There were plan A and plan B. And obviously when Assad consistently refused to play ball with them, they went for plan A, which was regime change. But the British are you know, I don't think it's a case of the UK following the US. I would almost say the UK is driving policy in Syria. And that's been demonstrated on a number of occasions when, for example, Trump, I think the very first time that Trump was kind of talking about getting out of Syria, all of a sudden we had the Khan Shaykhun chemical attack, and all of a sudden everybody piled back on again. And that, of course, was orchestrated by the White Helmets that were originally set up by British military intelligence guy, James Le Mesurier, but also behind it were other organizations that were being funded by the British Foreign Office to produce these organizations that would infiltrate and produce the propaganda that would criminalize and demonize the Syrian government and its allies. So no, the UK is one of the driving forces behind this war. And so therefore, yeah, there will be parallels between US media and UK media, but that's because they're all operating under the same umbrella.
I think that's really important to not acknowledge is that they are all moving. It's a one big corporation or movement or cult or whatever you want to say, all moving in the same direction. I mean, just an example of this, the House of Windsor, obviously descendants of the Merovingians, and I mean Prince Charles is bloodline related to Donald Trump. Donald Trump's bloodline related to Hillary Clinton. They've got like the 18th grandparents of Hillary Clinton are the same as Donald Trump. And people don't realize this in the world is that they are all related. They only get to that position because they have set various bloodline. This is a cult. And I think that's the real key to this is people understanding that all of these divides at that level are all just facades. And they don't realize that they are just working as one big unit. And anyone who's done any research into the conspiracies through the years will realize that, yes, if it happens over here, it's happened over there. They're moving as one big unit. And that's why it does seem like, oh, well, they're just following that. It's all orchestrated decades, thousands of years down the line, but it really is quite easy to pick apart once you start to realize that they're supposed to, like the Black Nobility bloodlines, and you look into like the likes of the Jesuits, the Vatican, but especially the Black Nobility bloodlines, you realize this is a bloodline thing. This is a bloodline mentality. And so when you see things happening in the UK that kind of follow what's happening in the US, it's not because it's happening in the UK or the US, it's because it's a cult movement within each country. These people aren't the only racism these people have is that you're the human race, and these are a bloodline a lot that don't want you to have anything, and they're psychopaths. And I think that people don't understand it on the grand scale is that there are us and them, and it really is that simple. Is that whoever gets in these positions of power, because they've been they established those positions over thousands of years, that they are moving all this into one goal. And it is a satanic, weird cult that have got the most strange and weird beliefs that if you explain them to the average person who doesn't look into any of this stuff, it seems mental, but it is mental. And you can only explain insanity by sounding insane. So if I tell you that someone wants to go into the Middle East, into Jerusalem and build a new Solomon's temple and perhaps try and control the planet from there, is that insane? Of course it's bloody insane, but I'm not saying I want to do it. I'm saying that these people want to do it, and they're all moving in that direction. And then all of these things come about. So when you see like a regime, like a Trump go out and a Biden come in, it makes no difference. They were all born from the same mentality. And they'll fight amongst each other, possibly. But really, at the end of the day, this plan, this long-held plan over thousands of years, is what is really important. And if you get in the way of that, even Kennedy was one of the families. Kennedy, Onassis, they were part of the families. But if you didn't play ball, they'll take you out because it's the plan. And that's, I think, the real crucial thing here is that people don't realize that there is a plan, an agenda that's thousands of years old, and it has very little to do with what we see in the mainstream media. And that's why none of it really makes any sense, because you don't have the map for the terrain. And to me, the real hard bit here is get to people to understand that they don't care about borders, don't care about countries, they don't care about anything other than this one agenda. And that's basically wipe a load of us out and control as many people as much as possible.
Branching off of that, I have a question for Vanessa. I was wondering if you, since we have somebody here who is an expert in the Middle East, I was wondering if you could fill us in on the gaps, or maybe let us know if there is a connection between this Beirut port explosion back in August and what that has to do with, because if you see here in the US, FP, foreignpolicy.com, they run a headline a couple days ago that says Syria's hidden hand in Lebanon's port explosion. Now, I don't believe anything that I read regarding stuff like that. I was wondering if you could maybe fill in the gaps and explain to us what was going on there.
Well, first of all, that investigation was carried out by a guy called Martin Chulov for The Guardian. Now, Martin, I've written a couple of articles about him, but one in particular. In my opinion, this guy is very probably MI6. He operated inside Syria with groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda when other journalists were being kidnapped and tortured and beheaded, etc. So without going too much further into his history, it's interesting, but I think he's very definitely connected to British intelligence. Added to which, just prior to this report coming out, interestingly, Anonymous released 2 document dumps relating UK Foreign Office activities infiltrating Lebanese high-level intelligence, security, army, police, and government officials. Now, in the first dump, which I think was about 1 month before the second one, they actually warned British intelligence officials inside Lebanon to leave, because the second dump would be naming people. And interestingly, the British ambassador resigned almost immediately on personal reasons and left Lebanon, as did a number of other operators who had also been instrumental in destabilizing Syria, funded by the British Foreign Office. So the timing is interesting, that this looks very much like a scramble by British intelligence to get back some sort of credibility, knowing, because Al Akhbar, one of the biggest Lebanese media outlets, is about to break the story of the second leak, because they are investigating it connecting Lebanese officials to British organizations running this intelligence operation. So all of this they know is going on in the background, right? So they know that a huge amount of stuff is going to be revealed about British intelligence operations destabilizing Lebanon. So what they quickly want to do is to try, in my opinion, to throw the ball back at Assad, at Syria, just as Biden comes in to try and, I mean, the story has fallen flat on its face. Nobody has actually picked it up because it's really shoddy journalism. I think it was Moon of Alabama looked into the Companies House papers and they said, yeah, well, this company's been started up, a dozen times. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't connect anything to anything. So it's really shoddy journalism. And you look at who wrote it, you look at who published it, The Guardian, which has been instrumental in managing narratives in Syria for 10 years. And the Beirut blast, in the opinion of many analysts here, for example, and myself, I think was an attempt, one, to finally, as I said, decimate Lebanese economy, because Lebanon, if you like, was the one stalwart, it was the one friendly neighboring country or powerful neighboring country that had a good relationship with Syria, albeit historically there had been divisions, there had been issues, etc. Most of them manufactured, of course, externally, but nevertheless they existed. And of course, it was the main exit route for Syrians. You know, for Syrians leaving Syria would go through Beirut. It was the safest exit. And for journalists coming in, same thing. They would fly into Beirut and then get a taxi into Damascus. So combined with COVID and the lockdown, and then the economic freefall in Lebanon, and then finally the Beirut blast, which not only decimated, of course, the Lebanese economy, but many of the foodstuffs, etc., coming into Syria through Lebanon were coming into the Lebanese port. So this impacted onto Syria. And so I think all of this was about destabilizing Lebanon, trying to turn the public against Hezbollah. And of course, that's where, again, where the British Foreign Office intelligence operations come in, because clearly them trying to get influence within the security forces, the intelligence, the government officials, including the foreign minister, was to effectively provide a counter against Hezbollah and to whip up popular opinion against Hezbollah, because of course Hezbollah is not only the nemesis of Israel in the region, it's the nemesis of the entire US coalition as a result by default.
I wanted to get back a little bit. I'm very glad to hear what Vanessa is saying, because it has been my contention based on the research I've done for my book Grand Deception, which concerns Russia, that when you dig deep enough, you find out that actually US foreign policy is UK foreign policy. Basically, the relationship appears to be the master blaster from, Mad Max, where you have like the big strong guy, but there's an old decrepit tiny guy who's actually telling him where to whack, where to go, what to do. And so same thing a few years ago we saw when there was a drone that went down, US drone went down over close to the Iranian territory. The Iranians took it down, and then Trump said, we're not going to escalate. He didn't launch the bombing mission in Russia. Shortly after that, the Anonymous, which apparently is controlled by the FBI, according to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks hasn't been wrong yet. The Anonymous leaked out the cables between the US British Embassy. The ambassador at the time was Sir Kim Darroch, and London Foreign Office. And basically what came out of those cables was that the whole thing was being orchestrated by British intelligence, that they knew that Donald Trump wasn't on board, but Sir Kim Derrick was saying like, we can put people around him. He said we can flood the zone around Trump, and we can, like when they manufacture an incident, they can pressure him into launching an attack on Iran. And that was another one, another example where it emerged that it's the British intelligence that's running the agenda. And the agenda goes back to, I wouldn't agree with Richard, thousands of years, but it runs back to about 200 years. And it was already at that time that the Mackinder formulated this thing where the British Empire had to rule over the world island, over the Eurasian continent. And because you can't do this militarily, because it's the largest landmass on Earth, it's like, I don't know what, 60% of the global GDP and most of the population of the world. You can't do it militarily. You have to arrange it so that you can always pit power against power, right? You can always pit Pakistan versus India, Iran versus Iraq versus Saudi Arabia, Lebanon versus Israel, and so forth. So you always have these little crisis spots. And the only thing that has changed is that after 200 years of empire, Britain basically exhausted itself. And then they moved their headquarters to the United States, established the Federal Reserve, and then used the American military muscle and American economic wealth to continue the same empire building scheme that is still going on today. And now that Donald Trump's no longer in power, so that attack on Iran 2 years ago failed, now that Biden is in power, I think that we might see a renewed attempt to go against Iran, obviously trying to destabilize Russia, try to pit Ukraine versus Russia, and so I think that we're in for a bumpy ride here.
Hey, Mike, can you let Jamie Ike in? He's in the waiting room. Thank you.
One thing I found very interesting is like how, England is this, they have the their monetary unit is valued so high, right? But it's like, what do they, how was their economy based on? Like, they have no natural resources. There's nothing for them to export, to help their economy grow. What is it exactly? And when you hear the Master Blaster, reference, that totally makes sense to me. And I've always felt that like we were kind of the big dumb muscle for, the city of London, likely, right?
Yeah, well, they're the mothership of the monetary system that they created with the Bank of England. And that monetary system basically is the parasite that can make the host do what the parasite wants, like in nature. And so basically you have somebody controlling the issue of money in a certain economy. And once they control the issue of money, they can make sure that the right academic organization, that the right corporations, that the right military, industrial, that all the right people get the money and all the wrong people don't get money. And you even have very recent statement by Mark Carney, who basically came out and said it flat out and said like, well, we'll make sure that the people who are helpful to our agenda get the money and the people who are not don't get the money. And so once you don't get the money, then you're one of us here, working hard to be heard by 12 people in the world, whereas they, go on the World Economic Forum and blast their message everywhere. But, I'll tell you something that I hope you'll find encouraging, because I grew up in a communist system, right? And so I was a teenager in the mid to late 1980s. We had the Communist Party in power. The Communist Party controlled the central bank. They controlled all the media. They controlled the police. They controlled the military, the courts, the judges, the prosecutors. They controlled everything. But once the system started to implode under the weight of its own contradictions, everything they tried to do, like ramping up the propaganda, ramping up the censorship. They even started putting phone numbers in the public transport to, like, if you see some, like if you see something, say something, to get people to snitch on each other. Nothing helped. When it was ready to implode, it imploded. And so will this one. So I think that a lot of what we're seeing is they can't control billions of us. A lot of what we're seeing are attempts to intimidate us into being passive and into acquiescing, and using these little tricks to make us think that they can control more than they actually can control, because they need us to acquiesce and to cooperate. And I don't think they're going to be successful. I think it's actually impossible for them to be successful. It's just going to be a question of time when the whole thing implodes, and then what we can put in its place.
And where did we see this on a smaller scale, with the president of Belarus being told that he would be given all of this access to capital if he imposed the lockdowns, and he said, I'm not doing it, and they upped it. We'll give you more. We'll give you more. We'll give you more. If that's not obvious to everybody that this is a planned operation, I don't know what is. If you have to bribe somebody to get on board with this operation, it's an operation. Yeah. It's by definition. So and of course that information got totally squashed here in the United States, where it was rarely available, if ever. It was on social media and then it was gone almost immediately. But for those of us that were paying attention, we saw this. We saw a guy giving up the plan. He just straight up said it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't react, and nobody reacts to that humongous story that came out. And they just, it's unbelievable. When the whole Hunter Biden laptop came out, the people in the truth community was like, dude, this guy's smoking crack and talking to China. And everyone's like, whatever, dude. And then as soon as like CNN starts saying it, then they're like, can you believe he's smoking crack and talking to China? And you're like, I just told you this like a month ago. Why does it come from them, the lying liars who lie? Do you take it from them and not your buddy that you've known for 20? I think even my brother, who we look like twins, he wouldn't take a word I have to say. It's unbelievable. But it's like someone on TV, some shiny metrosexual robot says it, reading off a teleprompter. All of a sudden, it's like, yeah, that's it. I just don't get it, man. It's unbelievable to me.
But I think that things have changed significantly. I think that because I know that since the fake pandemic started, I had a lot of friends who took me for like a loopy conspiracy theorist. And I can tell you that a number of them came around and said like, dude, fuck, you were right. Oh, I can't believe it. And so, people who woke up late are sometimes the fieriest opponents of what's going on, because they feel betrayed. They feel cheated. And I have friends whose children had leukemia, and then when they went back and looked at the inserts of the vaccinations that their children were giving, and they were like, oh my God, leukemia is there as one of the side effects. They did this to me. And so now they're like, they're ready to go to war. So I think things are not exactly the same as they always have been. And I think that the percentage of people who are open and ready to wake up is significantly greater now than it was maybe even just a few years ago.
Alex. Sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to say what you were saying earlier. When I published the episode with Charlie, I called it "Conspiracies Are Real and Affect You," because I'm trying to reach kind of Main Street people. So I shared the episode with a bunch of people that I know. One of my friends comes back and he says, "That's exactly what they want you to believe, bruh." So, this phantom created by the mainstream media, they probably don't have as much power as we think they do. But I don't know if any of you guys have heard of a guy called Rupert Sheldrake. He's a biologist from the UK, and he came up with this concept of a morphogenetic field. So he doesn't believe that heredity is only transferred through our genes, but there are invisible fields, you know, like a magnetic field or whatever, that give form. And this is why he says, like, rats in a lab that learn how to navigate a maze in Australia, the next set of rats in the US will learn how to navigate that maze faster. And the next set of rats, let's say in Europe, will even faster, even more quickly learn how to navigate that maze. So it's the same like if you enter into a psychedelic state, you literally are able to allow other people to, it's like standing on the shoulders of giants. So the more people, like you say, these kind of late to awaken people that feel betrayed, the more people that awake, the more this kind of morphogenetic field sweeps humanity. And it's not bound by time and space. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's in a plane that is outside of the, you know, this 3-4D reality. So the more we do the work, as horrible it is sometimes, and you feel like you're not reaching out to anyone or not enough people, and you look at the mainstream narrative and you see how bad shit's gonna get. Everybody's gonna get vaccinated and they're lining up for it, and then next thing they're gonna get microchipped. But the more we awaken, even 1-2 people per day or whatever, the more that morphogenetic field becomes stronger, where one day people, like, if we have this momentum, one day people will just be like, no, that sounds like bullshit, you know, like that's it. Yeah.
Let's wrap up with let's have Vanessa go really quick because she's running out of electricity.
Yeah, I've only got about 45 minutes left and I need to kind of go and quickly charge things. No, I think the one important point that I kind of want to make is, you know, the US, UK led alliance of terrorism has effectively waged hybrid multi-spectrum wars against prey nations since the war on terror was launched, right? Now the war on terror is against us. We are the new target of the war on terror, one. And the hybrid war, the multi-spectrum wars are now being waged against us, against our populations. So I think now more than ever, it's important to start making those connections between what has been happening in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, in Venezuela, in Yemen, you know, globally, and us. You know, we're being put into situations now of food insecurity, of economic insecurity. We're under sanctions. We're under lockdown. We're under blockade. We're effectively receiving the same treatment that's been handed out by our governments to these nations. And many of us have kind of gone, yeah, well, that's over there. You know, that's in another country. It's kind of sad. But now we're feeling it. So now I think the positive that comes out of this is that we're all together in this. There's no more left-right paradigm, in my opinion. Yeah. This is about humanity. This is about saving us, saving what we believe in. It's what Syria has been fighting for 10 years, and saving its secular society, its independence, its integrity, its territorial integrity. But that's what we're now fighting for. So actually, as humanity now, we're being brought together more than ever before, if we can just recognize it. And I think that's one message that we should all be putting out, not talking about platforms that are left or right, but platforms that are supporting free speech and humanity, that are supporting the little people, the working class, those that can't fight for themselves. That's what's now important. And I think that's one of the positives that's going to come out of this. I really do. And I think, I don't know, I just feel really strongly that as independent speakers and people with platforms and following, this is what we should be starting to make people understand and appreciate. You know, it doesn't matter if we disagree politically. It doesn't matter if we like Trump, we like Biden, whatever. But just to recognize it's not about any of this. It's about us. And it's about the future we give to our kids, our grandkids, you know, it's about the future, our future. And we're all in it together, actually, now. So anyway,
I agree.
Hating each other another time. Let's
Yeah.
focus. Let's prioritize. Let's focus on the people above us that are causing all of this problem.
Yeah.
And then if after we take care of them, if we want to fight amongst ourselves, go for it. But I get the feeling that at that point there won't be much of a need for a fight, or it won't look as dire.
Because people, they work on division.
Yeah.
They work on creating all these organizations that end up making us fight. Brexit was a division point. All of these issues. COVID is a division point, right? Everything is. Syria was a division point. They're all about dividing us, and that's what they do in these countries. They divide them along sectarian lines to maintain the conflict. But we need to actually be above that conflict point, because, as you say, when we go back or we go forward to the world that we want to live in, all of those issues become irrelevant. Right?
I said the same about the Q guys. I was speaking to some of the guys that feel let down by Q, and I said to them, well, what was it you wanted to achieve? Like, what did you want the outcome to be? So take Trump out. Do you still want them outcomes? And I went, well, yeah. So, well, they're the outcomes I want as well. So what's the difference? And I think that's what there's a big group there that really just wanted the same outcomes that most of us wanted. They just put their money on the wrong horse. And I just think if they can kind of come and join, I mean, that's a massive movement there of people that actually wanted decent, good outcomes. They just took along on a ride by the wrong person, but it's already ready made. You've just kind of got to go, we still want the same bloody thing. So what Vanessa was saying there, I think is completely right. We actually all just want the same thing. We might have different ways of thinking about it, but actually I want what you want. You don't want your kids to grow up in a world where someone like Biden gets into presidency and he can sniff kids and get away with it. And you don't want a world where you can't say what you want to people for fear of being put in prison. So we all really do want the same thing regardless. And that's, I think, the most powerful thing is there. What do you want? What do you want the world to
It goes even farther. I think it's not just Q people, but the BLM people and the Me Too people and the women marching for reproductive rights. Take care, Vanessa. But, they all want the same thing, which is to keep government out of your body, your rights to freedom of speech, and your right to make a living and take care of your family. They all have that. They literally are all marching. Like when BLM marches about law enforcement not shooting unarmed Black people, that's the same thing as, like, I have the right to fucking freedom, and I have the right not to be taken out by a government and overreaching law enforcement. I mean, it's all the same thing. But what happens is the news kind of pushes people in certain directions that end up fighting people on your level or below. It's never fighting up. It's all the same march, man. It's really all the same march. But they just get you to believe that the people you want, who you're fighting against, like, all the people mad at Antifa, or all the people mad at BLM, like, so fuck these guys, they're just rider lunatics. Well, they think the same thing of you, but in the end of the day, it's like, stop shooting unarmed people, let people open their businesses and make money. Don't tell me what I can do with my body, whether it's abortion rights or taking a vaccine. You all have the same arguments, but you got your guns drawn on the same guy instead of fucking looking up and going, dude, they're the problem. We're not the problem. We all have we basically have the same problem. We just have a little specific differences, and that's it. But nobody ever wants to look at that because it's so much easier to tee off on your own level and below.
But I think Sam, it's not just that. Yeah, we all have our difference. Maybe I'm against vaccines, maybe you're pro-vaccines, maybe I'm anti-gay, maybe you're pro-gay, whatever. But again, we go back to the one group having the ability to issue money, because then, like when they have the ability to issue money, then they tell you, hey, you wanna raise hell? Here's some money, organize people, because without money, you're not even gonna have a coffee maker, a computer, and an office space. And if you ask people, hey, why don't you all pitch in $100 a month so we can have these things and T-shirts and placards? Nobody will give you $100 a month. It has to come from George Soros. So it's George Soros who will give money to BLM, and then they're going to give money to Antifas, and then they're going to tell them, okay, like when Trump says this, go out and like break everything. And so that's how it happens. I think that even where we have differences of opinion on this, on that, or that, we wouldn't really go beat the crap out of each other over it. Maybe we'd have a discussion of it in a pub, and maybe if somebody got overheated, maybe we'd even fall to fist. But that's it, on a one-to-one basis. It wouldn't be like this group of 10,000 people coming out with baseball bats, trashing everything.
Yeah, we have a fundamental flaw as human beings in that we're tribal beings, and these people in control know this, and it's been used for thousands of years. That when the Theodosian walls were wrecked and Attila the Hun was marching on Constantinople, they pitched the fans of the green chariot racing team against the fans of the blue chariot racing team, who could rebuild the Theodosian walls faster. And they're always preying on this tribal nature that we have as human beings. And until we can sort of escape that and try and get to without trying to sound like a hippy-dippy, try and get to the next level of consciousness, they're always going to try and divide us and use our own innate psychology against us.
I concur, man. I should include an Antifa there. And there are controlled opposition and agents of chaos, provocateurs, that are sent in to get us to do that. So I would agree with that. But, BLM 2 is kind of like Black Lives Matter 2, which is the original, and everybody else. But yeah, I agree with that. They get us to fight with each other, controlling money and paying chaos. And these people don't realize what they're doing. And, if you go back also to how much of this Antifa were like just rich kids who got to basically, if you look in Seattle, Chicago, they were just playing the purge. They literally had a day of the purge where they're like, hey, man, no laws. Go burn down stuff. Go punch people. And if you go to jail, we're going to release you. But those, in my opinion, are, agents of provocateurs. But I think people, when they sit down, they're like, hey, we don't want a law enforcement that uses unjustified violence. And we don't want the government telling us what to do. And we want to be able to run our business and all that stuff. I think what everybody's saying here is right. It's like they just pit us against each other. But I will say, in the United States, we are now seeing like Black conservatives starting to rise up, and HOTOPs they're called, and they're pushing back on this narrative that Black people are the most oppressed people in the world, and it's like I think it's starting to resonate, and it's like these discussions, which like the Union of the Unwanted is having, is like I could just sit here and just listen all day. I know I talk a lot, but I could just listen to you guys because it's so powerful, and I think the word is getting out.
Yeah, I think the term principles over personalities is a thing that I kind of try and repeat in my head, because it's like it is a kind of ego. We all have we have egos, of course we do. But what we're trying to aim for, and the principles, I think people kind of, if we write down what you actually want out of life, what are your principles, and then get out of the way if it's not right. If what you're thinking isn't right, I constantly get things wrong. Of course I do, but I think maybe having children is a big different game changer for some people, because it's not really about what you want anymore, because you're only here for I'm nearly 40, probably got another 65 minutes and I'm off. But it does change the game for you, because it's not about you anymore. And I think anyone who has children kind of realizes that, look, it's literally, if this is shit now, what's it going to be like in 10 years time? And that's what really frightens me. And I kind of maybe that makes you step out yourself. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, having children definitely changes the perspective completely. But you have to, and part of being a good parent is laying down a foundation for a better life for the next generation. And if we can't do that here through discussion and that kind of drive to change things for the better for the future generations, then what are we doing?
Exactly. So what you'd want for your children, you'd hopefully want for other people's children as well.
But absolutely, the next generation, as a whole.
Absolutely, and we're the generation that need to do that, because the generation now that are going through universities, that are coming out with the whole Antifa mentality, the whole censorship mentality, the digital book burning, shutting down speakers at their campuses they don't like. We've got to make sure that doesn't get pushed onto our kids, because you know, one day they'll be the majority, you know, because the kids today that are going through that, they're the adults of tomorrow. They're going to go into those corporations, into politics, into those positions that are going to then have that influence, and we've got to make sure that we don't let them. And I think what you guys were saying about Antifa, what I think it was Sam was saying about Antifa and these rich kids going in and just kicking off, and I think again it ties into what Richard was saying as well about principles. I think the majority of people don't have any now. They don't have any principles, and that's one of the big things that I'd want to teach my son, who's only 8 months. But to have boundaries in life, you have certain things that you won't accept. You have a line that you won't allow to be crossed in terms of a level of self-respect that you have for yourself, whether it be in a relationship, a friendship, or something the government are asking you to do that you don't consider right or fair. That line where actually you just turn around and say, no, I don't accept that. I don't care if you're supposedly in a position of authority. I'm not doing what you've told me to do. And I think that's where kids today don't have that. And I think all those organisations that you guys have been talking about, BLM, Antifa, Me Too, all those, they've been really gearing to try and make people feel like they're victims. And if you feel like you're a victim, you've got no power, nothing I can do can actually make anything happen, have any influence, then you've generally got no boundaries. And I think that's a massive issue. I mean, I put something out on social media the other day and I've actually been banned from Facebook. I don't know why. But I just said, if you believe what's going on at the moment, you believe in COVID, you're scared, you're whatever, what is your line though? What would Biden or Boris Johnson have to come on the news and say, this is what we need you to do now, where you would actually go, no, actually that's too far. I'm not prepared to do that. You know, if they say you need to crawl down the street now because COVID hovers at 2 feet, 3 feet, would you do that? Or would you say, no, that's ridiculous, I'm not doing that? Where is the line? Because it feels like some people, or the majority of people, just don't have one. And it's quite scary to see. But I think it's a very good place to start with yourself. Someone mentioned it earlier that you need to work on yourself before you can go and start kind of trying to reorganize the world. Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that, but I think that's where we probably need to start, getting people to look in the mirror firstly and take some responsibility.
Do you not think the line changes, Jamie? In that I would never have thought 2 or 3 years ago that I would just accept being kind of locked in my own house. I can go out for exercise once a day. No way. That would never happen. There's my line. But now I've accepted it because I have to. And I don't know where, you're right, I don't know where the next line is. And I don't know if it is, you know, crawling along the streets, or I have to isolate in a single room, or, you know, it's crazy.
But have you really truly accepted this whole lockdown? That's yes. The big question.
Yes, officer, I have.
Well, you're going to be receiving a £100 fine if you're outside of certain hours, young sir. I mean, as we're highlighting the line, the morals, the principles that we were the age of most of us on this this talk at the moment, I would appreciate and think that most of us were brought up with a certain set of morals, principles, knowing good from bad, evil, etc. The further and further we've got through time with the manipulation of big tech and the governmental system, they've totally eroded and broken down the ability for parents to just be able to parent. The time scales that we've got, people are working not 37.5 hours a week, they're working 40 plus hours a week, not including traveling an hour to work and an hour back to work from work. And then you've got your children who go to preschool, or what is it, breakfast club. They'll go to breakfast club first, then they'll go to school, then they'll go to after school, and then they'll get picked up by their parents, or they'll even go to a babysitter after, and the parents will pick them up. They'll go and have McNasty's, and then they'll run upstairs, and they're in their phone, they're in their tablets. There's no communication. There's no unpacking of the day. You know, the system has created robots, not sheep, robots, synthetic robots with a mentality of, if this little shiny box, which is in my little box room, which is in my little box house, if it says this, that is what I need to do. So the line is, Mr. Boris Johnson will come on at 8 o'clock and he'll say to everybody, The new rules before entering the shop is you've got to hop on 1 foot first, 360 degrees, and then you've got to do the Macarena, and then you can come in. That will make you safe, public.
Yeah, this is what a cult does. It breaks down your boundaries and it pushes them slowly back to their road. And this is what's happened. It's a cult, and I genuinely believe that this is a cult. It's like Biderman's chart of coercion that me and Jay have talked about, me and Gaz have talked about. If you look through that chart, that shows you how this has been done. Biderman's chart of coercion. They've literally ticked their way down this list. That's a system they use to torture prisoners of war. This is exactly what they've done. This is a cult, and they've gradually ebbed away, as you say, as Jay was saying, the personal boundaries. I think we may be the last generation. We're around about the same age. You know, Jay's about 10 years younger than me, but the same kind of catchment.
Don't say older. Fuck right off.
Yeah. It's good lighting. I think.
I'm sorry about this. I hate to cut you off, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Apologies. I love you. I have to jump off. Great conversation. I loved everybody here. What a wonderful conversation. It's an honor to chop it up with you guys. And, you know, I appreciate it. Great job, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
See you later, chat.
Sorry,
just to finish that, it's a cult, and they've gradually eroded away your self-esteem, your boundaries that you accept. And that's what this is about. It's a slow ebbing away of your self-respect and your boundaries and what you will say yes and no to and what you'll push back on. And that happens over time in an abusive relationship when you're knackered. And we're knackered, but it can't go on forever. There is a point where you go, I'm in the corner and there is no further back now. And I've got to come back forward. And that's where we're going to get to very soon, hopefully, is that where people go, now I'm in the corner and now we come forward. And that's where they're terrified of, I believe.
Well, we know that in the United States, we've been experiencing this insanity. And we just wanted to make sure that you guys were experiencing it too. That's why we did the show. We just wanted to check.
Don't worry. We're not missing out.
Okay, good. Yeah, I figured. I mean, you guys have your own flavor of insanity, which, you have guys like Hat Mancock and people like that are dishing out this obvious government fuckery. So it's just a different version of it. But I feel like it's good to at least have these conversations where we get everyone together, get us starting to think about something maybe on a global level. That's why we do these shows. We've been doing them twice a month for the last couple of months. They've really been catching on. It was very important for us to have UK representation of this. Although, Alex, you've been on the show before, even though it was like 3 o'clock in the morning for you.
No, it's at 9. It's 9 p.m.
Right. But when you came on before, you stayed up late. We were very grateful, but it also signaled a flaw in our show's schedule. And that is that it's not as conducive for our UK audience. That's the reason why we wanted to do a specific show for you guys, because, listen, we're all in this together in a real way, not like the way the politicians tell us that we are, but we actually are. And it doesn't matter which country we're in. We're experiencing some of the same things. I think this will give a lot of people, I think a lot of people will recognize that they're not alone, which is important in this time. We don't want to be in this situation, lockdowns and all this insanity. But if there's anything worse than that, it's thinking that you're there by yourself. So at least this is a little bit of comfort for other people, recognizing that this is a shared experience for a lot of us. And then thinking about ways that we can move past this, because these things don't last forever. This insanity doesn't stay. There comes a tipping point where people rise up. It's just about trying to figure out where that is. And like Ben said, that we've had our own internal lines in the sand. In some cases, we've crossed them. So trying to determine where we put the next line and do we collectively stand up. So I'm really grateful that everyone was able to come out and join us. Let's wrap up with people just saying where the audience can find them. Let's drive some traffic to your shows. Let's start with the Amish, since they don't have electricity.
Sorry, Ben. Sorry, did I cut you off? I usually do that, don't I? I just want to say thanks again. I think this has been brilliant tonight. I've really enjoyed it. It's been good to meet everyone and connect with people, and keep your chin up, people. People are really struggling in this country. Yeah. Grandparents are scared of their grandchildren. This is where we're at. Yeah. And this is we're in a dark place, and people are struggling mentally. Keep your chin up. Like Charlie said, we're going to get through it. Most important thing, go to the armisinquisition.com.
Most important. Yes, absolutely.
No, it's
Christian,
been
where can we
great.
find you?
Yeah, I mean, we're all over the usual channels, Spotify and the other stuff. So yeah, get on board. Thank you very much again. It's been absolutely fantastic. Great to meet you guys. Absolutely fantastic to be involved in this conversation. And yeah, peace out. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, so christianyordanov.com is my website. If you search for my name, it's hard to spell, but my podcast is Connecting Minds, and that's on YouTube for now and all the usual places. So Connecting Minds with Christian Yordanov or christianyordanov.com. Maybe there'll be a link in the description because there's no point in me spelling out my name, but thank you so much, Charlie. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on. It was a real pleasure and honor to, converse with you guys. Definitely learned a lot. And yeah, I shall be checking out your stuff in the coming days. Thanks so much.
Thanks for being here. Jamie over at Iconic, what do you guys have cooking in the future? I know a lot, but.
Yeah, quite a lot. We're launching a new show in a couple of weeks with Gareth, who was on for a minute, presenting. Obviously our whole concept has been to bring like the mainstream production standard, if you like, to the alternative information, alternative content. Just to I think someone mentioned it earlier on here, I think it was Sam was mentioning it, that, people talk to each other and then they say things, they don't quite grasp it, yet then someone on the BBC or CNN says it, and then people, oh, have you heard this, when it's the same thing? And I think a lot of that is the perception of the information comes down to the production a little bit. Somebody sat in a suit in a posh studio, for somebody that is new to this information, on the surface, they look like they have more credibility than, for example, any of us sat talking in our rooms. The information they're talking is rubbish. They're talking off an autocue, whereas we're talking from what we actually have researched ourselves. But to the kind of viewer at home that's new to this, they see that. So that's always been our concept. So we're going to launch, a new show. It's going to go out every Friday from probably first week of March. Presented by Gareth. Yeah, that's going to be kind of a hybrid between a mainstream, soundbitey, very quick paced, and a kind of really long, in-depth interview kind of concept. Try and mash up the two and see what happens, really, because no one's doing that in the UK, I don't think yet. Kind of like an Alex Jones style studio broadcast kind of thing. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. And Rich is working on some really cool films at the moment as well, aren't you, mate, on the channel?
Unmute myself. Yeah, I'm working on a film called War of the Words. So that's obviously about social media censorship and just this whole thing about being domestic terrorists and where this is heading. And this is with a lot of the guys. Charlie's already sent his video in, and quite a few other guys, like Sam Tripoli has agreed to do it. Some Ryan Christian, the Last Vagrant Vagabond, James Corbett, quite a few people that are out there doing some really great stuff have agreed to be in the film as well. So this is about War of the Words, and it's actually set in like a 1950s sci-fi film, so it will be really different to look at. So this is the sort of work we get to do at Iconic, which obviously Jamie started, and I'm really grateful to be part of it as well. So you can find my work and the films that I've made before all on iconic.com, or you can find my podcast is on there as well, the video versions. I'm on YouTube still, just about, and BitChute at the moment, and that's where you can find my work, and glitchinthecode.co.uk if you want to send me an email. But yeah, most of my stuff's on Iconic, and I'm proud to be part of that, because it's something that needs to be done. We need an industry behind what we do so we can all make a living doing this, because we deserve to, quite frankly. If you're going to earn 250 grand a year for talking shit on the BBC, we should be at least be able to earn a living making content that's actually really helping people, and it's something I'm very passionate about.
Jeez,
I agree. I'm very
speech that, wasn't it?
I'm partial to Iconic. You can find my show on Iconic as well. So obviously I'm a fan. Noble, where can people find your work? Where can people check you out?
Yes, firstly, I've very much enjoyed the conversation today/tonight. You can catch me on most major platforms on the CFR network. Also on the old BoobTube, aka YouTube, on the CFR network again. Censorship is real, as we've been highlighting. It's very interesting times that we're living in. Very much so. Interesting, wonderful times. Be the best person you can be. If you're very new and just stumbled across this this particular link, be the best person you can be. Question absolutely everything. Study to show thyself approved, and most importantly, pass on the information. Each one teach 12. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks. And let's wrap up with Alex. Alex, where can we find you?
Guys, first, thanks for having me. The only way this could be better for me is if we could share a pint together. That would be fantastic, and I hope that life will give us this this possibility. Yeah. I publish on a blog called The Naked Hedgie, and Richard, if you're doing a show about censorship, the book I published in 2017 was banned by Amazon twice, not once, twice. So, and part of the nobody sued me. They said I defamed somebody, but nobody sued me. It was on the intervention of Jonathan Weiner, who was the policy advisor to John Kerry in Obama administration in the State Department. Anyway, so I have excerpts from that book on my blog, The Naked Hedgie, and I unfortunately don't write quite as often as I'd like to because I'm busy with work. I'm busy with trying to raise 2 boys and being actually a present father. But hopefully I'll be able to do more writing in the near future. And so in that near future, maybe we can share a pint one of these days. That would be great. So thank you for having me. And it was great. I enjoyed this greatly.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it. We know you have busy schedules and lots of things that you're doing. So for Ricky Varandas from Ripple Effect, who had to take off, and Sam Tripoli from Tinfoil Hat, Midnight Mike running the show from OBDM, I'm Charlie at Macroaggressions. Thank you all for coming out. Share this video far and wide. The censors will not help us, and we appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.